I'm Bob Marion. I'm the PEO for Aviation, and I don't know how long we're supposed to be here, 30, 45 minutes, an hour or so. So what we've typically done is I'll introduce all the PMs up here and who they represent, and then I'll say a few words, and then we'll go ahead and do a Q&A. So again, I'm Bob Marion. I'm the PEO for Aviation. I've got Tori Burgess here representing PM UAS, Jeff Hager representing PM Apache, Billy Jackson representing PM Utility Helicopter, and so that's Blackhawk and Lakota, and Common Engine. Steve Clark, PM Fixed Wing, Rob Berry, PM Cargo, so that's Chinook, Rich Crutchmar, that's Improved Turbine Engine and Future Vertical Lift, Matt Hanna, Aviation Systems, and Kelvin Nunn, PM Non-Standard Rotary Wing Aircraft. So that's really the entire portfolio within PEO Aviation, and so our mission is to work with all of our stakeholders, which are many and include all of you, to deliver capabilities to our Army. So the main folks we work with daily are our TRADOC capability managers down at Fort Rucker, who define the requirement, the headquarters department of the Army on the G-staff side, who define policy from a logistics standpoint in the G4, fund programs in the G8, and validate requirements in the G3. So we work with those folks daily, as well as all of the folks on Team Redstone, which if you heard General Gabriel's discussion yesterday, he talked about an operations order that Headquarters AMC recently published, and he calls it Unified Action, and that's aligning the contracting center, the weapon systems contract, or the ACC Redstone we call it, the Weapon Systems Contracting Center, and the Aviation and Missile Research Development and Engineering Center, AMRDEC, under his command in AMCOM. So we work with General Gabriel and that group of folks on Team Redstone, and truthfully, those organizations provide the workforce as matrix subject matter experts inside of the formations that the PMs have designed, deliver capabilities for our Army. So we do that inside the aviation, PEO Aviation, for the aviation portfolio. But I'll also say that we're not an island, and we don't deliver every capability that the Army delivers to aviation formations. So we work with the PEO for Intel, PEO IEWS at Aberdeen. So we work with them mainly between fixed wing and UAS on the sensor side. We work with PEO Missiles and Space in the Joint Attack and Munitions PM office for all of our munitions. We work with PEO Soldier, who delivers our Air Warrior system. We work with PEO C3T from a radio perspective. We work with PEO Strive for simulators. So really, I mean, a lot of people think everything that happens inside of a aviation formation comes from PEO Aviation, and that's not really the case. We coordinate with all those formations to make sure we're bringing all that capability to bear in a formation when they need it. So the teams here work with their fellow PEOs and PMs so that we deliver those capabilities, the entire capability set to our aviation formation. So the last thing I'll say before we open it up for questions is I don't know if you were in the conversation that we had, the briefing that I did here about a half hour ago, but really we've accomplished so much, I think, inside this enterprise, not just from a government perspective in terms of defining requirements and resourcing and laying in strategies to deliver capabilities. We've done so much in the last 2 years, but really we have, if you saw that chart that I put up there, I think it was the third chart, we have so much yet to do to deliver all the near-term modernization efforts, and again, I'm talking materiel. We have so much to do to deliver those capabilities, and when you jump down to the midterm, there's a lot of things we're doing in the next 5 years there. And then ultimately long-term in the joint multi-role technical demonstration as it feeds into future vertical lift. And I don't know if Dan Bailey or Dr. Bill Lewis are here or not, but specifically within AMRDEC, Rich and his team work daily with that group to make sure we're nested in the design and developments that are coming out of the technology developments at the component level and the air vehicle demonstrations and the mission systems architecture demo. So much going on throughout all of the portfolio, and in your organizations that you represent, and in the organizations and the other PEOs that these PMs represent as well. So much going on inside of all of those formations for us. And in the end, I said, if we're successful and we do all the things that we've said we're going to do, we're going to have vastly different capabilities in just a short 5 years on our ramps. So I think that's a great testament to what the enterprise has been able to accomplish, but also a great challenge for so much more that we have yet to do here in the next couple of years. So with that, I think I'll open it up to Jen for her first question. So, no, I'm just kidding. No, that's all right. I don't want to poke the sleeping bear. So let me see if there's any other hand that might go up other than Jen's. There we go. What's that?
Well, I'll stay stood up then. You spoke about DVE solutions in your talk upstairs. I read yesterday on the Fed BizOps site that the Army had decided to go with an in-house solution for DVE. I know that last year you were canvassing industry. So why have you decided, and I'll look towards you, sir, why have you decided to go with a in-house solution? What is that in-house solution? And then lastly, when do you plan to transition to a full DVE solution?
We have had a lot of questions on the DVE brownout solution, rotorcraft enhancement solution. So we had an RFI that went out in the November-December timeframe. We found out what industry was doing in the DVE arena. We also had an IPT in February where we had approximately 110 participants and about 30 different organizations that were from the government that had something either ongoing with DVE or were thinking about doing something DVE. So we first understood what industry was doing. We also gathered what government was up to. And in looking at those and looking at our brownout requirement, the CRD Fort Rucker Colonel Mosier's group did a requirements crosswalk and determined that the material solution that the government was already working could be met and meet the brownout rotorcraft enhancement system program. So we then took everything that the government was doing, leveraging what MRDEC is doing, leveraging what SOCOM is doing, and leveraging what PEO Soldier's doing to develop a brownout requirement and a material solution that allows us to get at it much faster. There's a safety consideration with the brownout situation where we lose lives every year. And by bringing it where the government is doing the integration and taking all the money and efforts that the government has already been going with brownout, we can develop a solution much faster. But that is with a certain caveat, and that it's for a very limited number of systems, approximately 300. It is for only the brownout environment, not the other 10 environments. It will be for single aircraft, not multi-ship. It will be for approach, minimal forward hover, taxi, and takeoff. It is not the full DVE solution. Our intent is to go into production and field with that effort in the FY 20 timeframe, 19-20. While we're moving forward with that effort, Fort Rucker will be writing the requirement for what they really want for the full DVE solution. They're going to do an AOA over the next year, followed by a requirements document that clearly indicates what they want. We believe it will be all 11 environments, multi-ship, 360 coverage around the aircraft. But that is still to be determined by the AOA and the requirements document. Thank you.
So, sorry, just to clarify on this initial capability and this government equipment that you'll be using, can you just go into a bit more detail of what that technology is and if it will be fitted or it's just an adaptation of what's already on the helicopter itself?
It will be in addition to what is currently on the aircraft, but we will also leverage what the platforms are already developing and integrate those systems as much as possible. We will have to develop an A kit and a B kit and then integrate the system on the platforms.
Hi, Jen Judson with Defense News. Just to follow up, can you explain what you mean by multi-ship capability?
Well, currently, the only requirement we currently have is DVE bores, and it is a single ship requirement. I can't really speak to what the requirement will be for multi-ship. We have to do the AOA first, and then Fort Rucker will clearly say what their requirement is for multi-ship.
I still don't understand what multi-ship is. Is that meaning you can see where other aircraft
My apologies.
are in the air?
Yeah.
Okay,
I understand your question now. My apologies. So what it means is that instead of one aircraft flying alone, it could be multiple aircraft flying on a mission.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. This is probably a question for fixed wing. Haven't heard a lot about fixed wing at the show yet, so I wanted to ask where you are with the EMARS program in building and producing the 24 aircraft that you're working toward, and when we might see an initial deployment of EMARS. Where are you in that?
Okay, thank you for the question. EMARS 1 initial deployment is already underway. We have one aircraft deployed to Southcom and two aircraft to AFRICOM. Those were the initial variants. We called the S model variant. The remaining portion of the EMARS is completing the prototypes of the QRC adaptations into the program of record. We will take those to initial key personnel training and testing. That will be in the right now templated for first quarter of FY17. So they're completing mod. We have a long summer ahead of us in terms of qualification, AIMS type testing, as well as J primes for system qualification. The remaining portion of the portfolio contracts have been let for the follow-on production efforts. Fielding will continue through FY19 on EMARS.
When did the two aircraft deploy to Southcom and AFRICOM?
The time frame was late March, early April. So very recently. Yes, sir.
Hi, Andrew Dravinger, independent journalist. This one's for Rich. Hello, Rich, nice to see you again. Because I'm from the UK, I'm a bit slow and didn't pick up on the February difference between the CS1 RFI and what that meant in terms of the CS3. Could you just sort of go over that again so I can understand it? Thanks.
Absolutely. So, because you're from the UK, I'll talk slow. And, now, I also won $10 because I knew that was going to be the first question asked of me, so I'll owe you a cup of coffee. But so, as we move toward the MDD in the first quarter FY17, the Army, as the lead service, is taking the program through the Army acquisition process. And that includes the Army Requirements Oversight Council. And so I can't, with any specificity today, say which capability set is the initial acquisition that the Army's going to pursue with their joint partners. But what I can tell you is that we are positioned through those RFIs to make informed decisions and present those decisions to the Army leadership to make that decision as we go forward. Did that answer the question?
Still a little confused because I thought an armed attack, a reconnaissance was sort of had been put into the deep background because of the move for manned-unmanned teaming and the closure of a armed aerial scout.
Yeah, so that is a requirements question. As a material developer, it's not my position to answer that specifically, but I can say that the RFIs were intended to inform us. And so, when we look at the data that we're asking for out of those RFIs, it was to understand the technical maturity in those different capability sets, the resource requirements to mature that technology to a point that would meet our timeline and the timeline. So we have done a lot of programmatic estimations on all those things in preparation for the MDD and in preparation for laying out the program and the resources required for the program. And so the idea there was to get that information for both those capability sets in order to preserve the decision space.
Dave Bergen here, Army News Service, and I'm not sure who the question goes to, but yesterday during Miss Easter's presentation, she quickly went over the PNT program, Positioning, Navigation, and Timing. And can you describe what it does and what it is and where we're at in that particular program?
Yes, sir. So Assured PNT, although crosses across all platforms, probably 60% of it resides in aviation systems in the aviation mission equipment portfolio, because we have all the navigational equipment. So it is a main effort for the Army, and we are moving forward with it. It includes things like anti-jamming antennas and military cards for our navigational equipment that make it more difficult for the adversary to make our location not accurate. So knowing where we are also allows us to make sure that our weapon systems hit the locations they're supposed to, and also is a safety factor. So Assured PNT, our integration time frame is the 19 to 22 time frame.
Hi, I'm Pat Host with Defense Daily and Rotor and Wing. I guess my question is for General Marion. Your modernization chart that you showed today looks very busy and very ambitious, but as we know, delays cost money. I'm wondering, how are you going to ensure that all these modernization efforts stay on track? And I'm also wondering, are any of OSD's acquisition initiatives being used in these modernization efforts?
Sure, yeah. So that was the point of the chart, so you were paying attention. That's good. So if you remember, one of the things I said is, number one priority, right? Get to the finish line. So there's all kinds of tools that we use. Just about anyone in a suit here could probably rattle off 15 things that they do inside the programs that they're responsible for, whether it's earned value management. Typically in development, you use things like earned value management, technical performance measures. You run Monte Carlo simulations of the integrated master schedule that you use to determine what the probability is that you're going to achieve that piece of work, that work package that you've done that you've laid out during an integrated baseline review. There's all kinds of things that you do just from a management perspective to make sure you get to that triangle on the chart, right? So those are normal business practices that, as I said, walk to any one of these booths and ask them what they're doing, and if it's being executed inside of one of these companies, then they have, from a technical perspective and a business perspective, probably 100 metrics in each one of those areas that they track to be sure they have leading indicators to make sure that they know early if they start to get behind. So that's the normal course of doing business, right? So, but yes, so there's a lot to get done in the next 5 years, and that was my point. We did a lot of work to get to where we are today across multiple lines of effort throughout the entire portfolio to deliver modernized capabilities in the midterm, and the majority of the things that I talked to were midterm. We've got some things we're doing in the near term with modernization. Modernization as we execute full rate production contracts and divest our older platforms, and we have the JMR piece and the FVL piece. But a lot of that stuff is to deliver capability in the midterm. So you're right. We're going to be really busy. It's going to be a challenge, but this group of folks has continued to deliver capabilities during my tenure here as the PEO and my 3 other assignments in many of the PMs that these gentlemen are responsible for today, and I have all the confidence that we'll continue to deliver those because we're using those tools to ensure that we're postured to get there. I don't know, does that answer your question? Was there something else? There was a second part to that.
Yeah, for the most part, I like the modeling and simulation techniques. You said if you could tell me any more of these basic techniques you guys use, that'd be great.
Right. So better buying. So you asked about OSD initiatives, right? So the 2 main initiatives that you'll hear our Defense Acquisition Executive, the Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, Mr. Ken, will talk about, better buying power. And really, when he talks about the fundamentals of better buying power, if you look at better buying power 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, 3.0 being the most recent, it's really about critical thinking, right? We have processes, we have the professionalism of our core, but really it's about critical thinking to use all those tools to make good decisions based on the uniqueness of each individual program, right? And probably the single thing you hear talked about most often under the better buying power guys is the will cost, should cost initiatives, right? So that's we lay out a program as we expect we might anticipate the program to mature as we go through this milestone process and burn down risk and go in front of a decision maker and say we're ready to move to the next phase, right? That's the whole purpose of these processes, whether they're JSIDs or PPBE or acquisition. It's to do all those things to get to a point in space where a decision maker can make a decision. We fund to a certain level, but the idea is what efficiencies can we put in place in the programs that if we were to achieve them, we could take that amount that we thought we were going to spend, that will cost, and actually achieve some efficiencies, and that's what the should cost piece is. So there's lots of different should cost initiatives, and we've used things like using SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research opportunities. We've used an Army Working Capital Fund investment program to buy out to address obsolescence issues and either buy out capabilities or develop something new. There's a variety of things that we've used in should cost initiatives to help reduce the cost of modernization so we can in fact do more modernization across the portfolio.
Thanks.
Hi, Mike Jameson with Aviation Week. First off, General Marion, are we going to be able to download or be made available your presentation from earlier today? Is that going to be available somehow?
No way.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure it'll be posted to some Quad A website. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be.
Okay, excellent. And if it's not, I'll reach out, I suppose.
Sure.
Second, I wanted to go back to the fixed wing question from earlier, EMARS, and focus a little bit on that. You said 3 have already been deployed, I'm assuming, in the MC-12S configuration. Is that correct?
That is correct. So for the greater group, EMARS consists of 24 aircraft, as Jim mentioned, and it's made up of 4 variants. So the initial variant was the S variant. While they all share about 80% commonality, they also specialize in either intelligence or reconnaissance type capabilities. The remaining 3 variants are existing capabilities that we've taken from the QRC under names of TACOP, Constant Hawk, Vader type aircraft. We bring those into a modification effort in order to achieve the CPD compliance requirements. 80% commonality, make sure they meet all program of record criteria, and also go through formal follow-on test and evaluation. So that's really the phase that we're in now. We have fielded and deployed the first variant. The remaining 3 variants, we are completing those initial variant mods, as we call them. Some would consider those prototypes. We will take those to test this summer and well into second quarter of FY17 to complete that, and then deploy or field those.
Okay, and what are the names of the other 3 variants going along the lines of the MC-12S?
Sure. So the second variant would be called the G for a geospatial type specialization.
So the MC-12G.
That is correct.
Geospatial intelligence. Okay.
Let me adjust that a little bit. If you want to use, there's multiple nomenclatures. If you want to say MC-12, then they're going to be MC-12S, 1, S2, S3, S4.
Okay.
And if you, depends on which vernacular you want to use. If a common person would say MC-12S, probably specializes more along the SIGINT type of activity. The G would be more of the GEOINT. The M is a multi-int, and the V would be more of a vehicle and dismount exploitation capability.
Okay, because we'd be looking for the official names of the
when they enter
aircraft.
the Army's inventory, it'll be S1, S2, S3.
S1 through S1, 2, 3, 4 for the 4
Correct.
variants. Okay.
Correct.
And how many of each are you planning on procuring?
There's a total of 24. There's 4 of the S1. There will be 4 of the S2, 3, and 4 of the S4.
So 4 of the S2,
Yeah.
4 of
And
the
I'm-
S3, and
And I'm
4
probably
of the S4?
at risk of doing math in public, which is
That's
always a
16
danger,
total.
especially with that, because we think of them sometimes in different numbers. But if you would like a complete breakdown afterwards, I will certainly lay that out for you so you can better understand it.
That would be outstanding. Thank you.
Okay?
Hi, Courtney McBride with Inside the Army. Just had a quick question. If you could provide us with a bit of an update on the way that the future airborne turbine environment work may impact FVL.
So you're referring to the Improved Turbine Engine program? Yes.
Right.
Right.
But,
So,
yeah.
so the specific reason that we're developing the Improved Turbine Engine program is for the current fleet. So we are going to get the Apaches and the Blackhawks back to the meeting their KPPs, their key performance parameters that they no longer meet because of the weight growth of the aircraft. As that engine is matured and developed, it also has opportunity to be used with the future vertical lift concepts, particularly on the low end of the capability sets. Capability set 1, 2, and potentially the low end of 3, depending on how those airframes mature and whether the technologies are proven out to provide the performance that's expected out of those capability sets.
I think there was some discussion previously on some of the FATE work being available a little bit earlier than sort of ITEP, and I wasn't sure if there was what the distinction was there.
Say that FATE is the Future Advanced Turbine Engine program. That's the science and technology program, and it's focused on a slightly larger horsepower variance than the ITEP. ITEP is the 3,000 shaft horsepower turbine engine. It also had a science and technology program called the Advanced Affordable Turbine Engine that provided the robust maturation process for the critical technologies. And so ITEP technologies are technologies developed under the 8 program are transitioning into the ITEP program, and FATE is focused on a larger shaft horsepower engine concept.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, James Drew from Flight Global. Could I ask you all just about the relationship between the Army and Congress at the moment? It seems Congress loves everything in aviation except for JLINs. They've also asked you to go faster on future vertical lift, and they've also been willing to put a lot more funding into some of those helicopters that were cut from the budget. Could you just explain what you want to see at the end of the markup, at the end of the year? What would be helpful to your portfolios?
Right, so I'll start off by saying we support the president's budget. That's the standard response you're going to get from any of us. The congressional committees are going to mark how they mark, and then they're going to go to conference and they're going to do what they do. And in the end, hopefully we'll get an NDAA and we'll get an appropriations bill and we'll be off and running to execute to that. But at this point, we support the president's budget as submitted. And I'll tell you, so my assessment is the Congress has been very, very good to Army aviation over the last decade and a half. I mean, we have we talked about the modernization, and again, I'm talking materiel here, but the capabilities that we've been able to deliver to the Army and to Army Aviation have really come from the Congress's willingness to support our modernization programs and to support our procurement programs. And when we've had issues with wartime losses, the Congress has, I can't think of a time where they haven't stepped up and funded wartime replacement aircraft to support losses. So the Congress's support for our Army and Army Aviation has been excellent in the time I've been in this job, and I think if you go back over the last decade, I think you'll find that same thing.
Grant Turnbull from Shepherd Media again. This is a question for Lieutenant Colonel Burgess. The Shadow V2. I was told that this year you'd be integrating a new EOIR sensor onto the V2, and that it would be actually rolled out into theatre potentially this year as well. Somebody told me that potentially that might be delayed now. So maybe you could explain that a little bit more, whether what the issues are surrounding that, or if that's even true. And then just a quick follow-on from that. I mean, has there been any updates on fitting the Shadow with any kind of small guided munition?
So thanks for the question. We have integrated an MX-10, which is an L3 Westcam product, into the Shadow V2. Textron has some of those, and they're going to put them on a government-owned, contractor-operated system in theater in probably the next 2 months. There was language in, I believe it's the appropriations bill, that said that we need to go to the Secretary of the Army to take a look at our competition strategy before we start awarding payloads. We now have two sources to get our laser-designated payloads. Both had the same requirement, both for laser designator. And we actually are going to be going up and starting to, we talked to General Marion last week. We're going to go up and talk to the DASM and show them our competition strategy of how we're going to compete between our two sources for the laser designated payloads. We have procurement dollars in 16, which we believe we'll be able to award. And I think there's money in 17 and 18.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up. So the MX-10 that should be integrated on the V2, is that contracted, or do you now have to compete that? Is that what you're saying?
No, so we held a competition to have a second source other than just one source for the payload. That was held in 2012. We have now integrated that second source, which was the L3 Westcam product. We've now qualified that payload, and we now have two qualified laser-designated payloads that can operate on the Shadow V2.
Weaponizing Shadow?
Oh, I'm sorry. Currently, we don't have a requirement to go out and weaponize Shadow. So I think that's probably more of a requirements question.
Yesterday, I had a chance to talk with both Team Apache and Team Chinook about weight and what you're doing to bring down weight. And obviously, ITEP will help solve some of these problems. But I'd like to give you a chance to weigh in on Black Hawk and what you're doing to bring down the weight. It got sort of singled out yesterday as potentially gaining like 73 pounds a year or something like that. So besides ITEP, what are you doing to solve that issue?
Well, I'll be honest with you, we're not doing a lot to bring down the weight of a Black Hawk. I will tell you we have an EBAP system now that's about 50% lighter than the current BAP system, only used in combat, of course. There are some programs we are looking at to possibly reduce weight to require us to coordinate with our TICM to make sure that we're not violating any requirements we currently have. One of those initiatives could be a one-piece composite stabilator for the aircraft that would cut the weight of that stabilator in half. Something always to be considered is the center of gravity of that aircraft and where we have center of gravity challenges with an aircraft. Sometimes we take weight off the back end of the aircraft, we have to add additional weight to the front end of the aircraft to make sure we're within CG. So all these things have to be considered. So sometimes a weight change, reduce weight in one area doesn't necessarily mean a total weight reduction of the platform.
Bob, before I go, does anybody other than press want to ask a question? No? Okay, well, you had your chance. This morning, General Gabram said about rebalancing contractors and bringing more back to the Army. That seems to be a difficult proposition, bearing in mind the way technology is developing and the cost of specialists. I just wondered if you had any comment about how that might be made, rebalancing towards the green force, bearing in mind the cost of expertise.
Right. So I think General Gabram was specifically referencing rebalancing across soldiers performing maintenance tasks on the aircraft, vice paying contractors to support execution of that maintenance, and specifically what we've experienced for our deployed forces. So as we've had to manage the number of soldiers, boots on the ground, there have been formations that have deployed with a skeleton headquarters staff and aviators to fly the aircraft, but because of the force manning levels, FML, sometimes we've left the maintenance teams that would actually perform the maintenance on those aircraft, we've left them back at home station, and we've had contractors doing that. And so that erodes the ability of our maintenance teams to have the real world experience of maintaining aircraft in a combat environment. Plus it's expensive to maintain a contractor workforce in theater. So I think his idea was that we need to rebalance and get back to having maintenance being the primary function of soldiers, and when we deploy, as best we can, given the other constraints that we have in the Army, deploying maintenance as a part of combat operations, just like we would deploy soldiers flying and soldiers as a headquarters. So I think that's what his specific, the thing he was specifically addressing.
I was just wondering if it was a case of more a withdrawal from Afghanistan, so there was a less requirement on contractors, but there again there are so many flashpoints around the world that sort of isn't going to happen, is it really?
Well, I think the idea is going to be considering your maintenance part of the combat operations of your unit, and not something that's wise, if possible, again, given the other constraints that we have, it's not being wise to pull that piece out and then deploying with your unit and contracting out the maintenance. We talk about becoming more expeditionary as an Army, not just in Army aviation, and there are, as you said, we're still going to have requirements to go places all around this globe, and we might not be falling in on a FOB that's been there for 10 years, that's got a really nice chow hall and really nice showers. You might be out in the middle of nowhere, and you might not be able to take contractors with you. So we have to have maintenance soldiers as part of our combat operations teams who have had that experience and not learning from scratch the first time they show up somewhere in the middle of nowhere with nothing.
Just a follow-up to that, this may be a stupid question, but why were maintenance teams left behind and contractors deployed with units? And I don't think I understand that.
Right. So General Gabram used the term FML, force manning levels. So the Army's been told when you deploy, and you've heard a lot of senior leaders talk about this, when you deploy, we have restrictions on how many people can actually deploy, how many soldiers can actually deploy. So in many cases, not just maintenance, in many cases, we've had contractors performing certain functions for us when deployed, maintenance being one of them, because we had limitations on the number of soldiers we could have in theater. So whenever we possibly could, we would use a contractor to perform a specific function and not take a soldier to do it. And we're, as you have the opportunity now to sit back and reflect on the things that we've done and what have been the outcomes as a result of it, we realize that's something that in the future that we shouldn't trade that away if the conditions, permit us not to. Okay, going once.
Force manning levels. Who implemented FML? Was it congressionally mandated, or was it within the Army's drawdown plan, or how did that come about, sir?
Man, I should have stopped before I got to that one. Yeah, so that's really not a material developer person who's trying to take weight out of a Black Hawk question. So what I guess I'd rather say is let me talk with you offline about FMLs and what that, the kind of decisions that are made in those areas. Okay. Well, listen.
Just probably a quick question on ITEP. Obviously it's for Blackhawks and Apaches and potentially for future vertical lift. Considering the timelines for ITEP and when FVL is potentially coming online, what do you think is more likely? Will we use just the technology developed through ITEP to build a different engine for FVL, or do you think that it's potentially something that you could just drop in to what you end up with?
So I'm going to try to answer that question in two different ways. So from a timeline perspective, we're intending to go into production on ITEP in the 2024 timeframe. That's the LRIP decision there. So the engines will be being produced at that time. When you look at FVL, the capability is intended to come online in the late 20s, like 2029, 2030 timeframe. So depending on the capability set that we're going after, I think we would be foolish if we didn't use ITEP if the capability set, if the requirements for that particular capability set allowed ITEP to be used. So in that case, I think we would take an acquisition strategy that it would be a drop-in solution for ITEP. If it's something other than a capability set that ITEP is powered to, we would take a different approach, and it would be more of asking the OEMs and their partners that develop the engines to provide a system-level solution with those ITEP technologies. And the reason I say the system-level solution is because when you talk to those guys, and I have been this week, there's a lot of anticipated value in approaching the engine and the airframe control at the same time. And so in that situation, I think it would be a slightly different approach to utilizing the technologies from ITEP in a FEL solution. Was that vague enough?
It's still early. So.
Looks like one last question.
UH-60 Victor.
Question is, when are we fielding UH-60 Victor?
How are you doing, Colonel Jackson? I'm Program Manager for UH-60 Victor. Your question is when we're going to field the system. We should be fielding the system in the 2022 time frame. Now, I think what you're really interested in is when it's going to be available for FMS sales. Yes. So, yet to be determined. I think you'll be a very interested partner in how well that goes. Right now, our limitation would be our capability to produce that platform in full rate production at CCAD. Now, we're developing that MWO procedure so we can apply that in other facilities as well. So when we can do it, I would say there will be a time, and you probably know my international sales office, interact with them. They'll be keeping you guys informed on how the Victor program is going, and then we can start those discussions about when it makes sense to be able to recapitalize or apply that MWO for Victor to your L models and other customers' L models. But I would say, realistically, I would say in the mid-2020, early 2020 time frame. Thank you.
All right, well, listen, thank you for your interest. I appreciate it. I think most of us will be around for a little while this afternoon on the floor, so grab someone and ask them if you have any other questions. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.